Hello and welcome back to Tea Time. We have the immaculate Admiral Paco here with us, and Paco has a background knowledge and degree in history, and we are going to talk today about Pocahontas.
Yes, a movie that is completely historically accurate with absolutely no faults whatsoever. Sarcasm.
Right. So, real quick backdrop for this. Pocahontas is a 1995 American animated musical historical drama film,
Yep.
side eye, based on the life of I'm going to say this tribe name wrong. Powhatan? Powhatan?
Powhatan.
Cool. Powhatan woman
Or
Pocahontas.
Powhatan.
Powhatan woman
Because English people can't pronounce words.
Powhatan woman Pocahontas and the arrival of the English colonial settlers from the Virginia Company. The film romanticizes Pocahontas' encounter with John Smith and her legendary supposed saving of his life. The film was produced by the Walt Disney Feature Animation Company and released by Walt Disney Pictures in 1995, hence the reason why I said the year. It is the 33rd Disney animated feature film and the sixth film produced and released during the Disney Renaissance. I don't know why they call it the Renaissance. This shit wasn't nice.
Um, it was the series of movies that allowed the animation division of Disney to continue to exist.
Yeah, I know, but like maybe it shouldn't have been in the Renaissance. Like Renaissance implies that things were learned and we grew. All I learned from this movie was none of this happened. You got all the names right, but none of this happened.
Oh, they learned and grew. They learned and grew that hey, if we do stories in this paint by numbers fashion, we make bank.
Gross. Also, Lindsay Ellis did a video on this. Please go watch her video because she really does a good job of it. But
Yeah, if you
like
want to hear someone talk about this very well in an essay format, Lindsay Ellis's video is top notch.
yeah, this is just
But if you
basically
want to hear two people ramble about it for a while, you should stay here.
yeah. Well, Paco has a degree in history, and Paco was nice enough to get out all the history books and be like, "Let me explain you a thing."
Yeah, I needed to refresh my memory on this one. Part as an element of my history degree, part of my area of focus in college was actually Native American history, although it tended to focus on South and Central America and less North America. Um, but I have some background knowledge on it, most of which I have of course forgotten because that was, oh gosh, is that, it's almost 20 years ago. Why am I old? Um, but I got out the old books, refreshed the memory a little bit, and I'm ready to talk about Pocahontas, both the movie and the history.
Right. So, the 1995 film. Bad, wrong, incorrect. Only thing correct. They got the fucking names right. This
Yep.
this is like a D on a test. You only remembered the names, but you got everything wrong.
Yeah. The most of these details are not correct, but well, you know what? I'm going to amend that statement. The details of the names, you got that. The details of like some mythological historical events, we got a couple of those. The actual order of all of those things, no, wrong, wrong. This is all wrong. Um, but as I'm just gonna yoink this from Lindsay Ellis's video because I think it is a good thing to point out here as well. Is um, that in the context of making this movie in the 90s, it was perceived as being um, a look at us being inclusive and look at us trying to tell this story where the Native Americans aren't the villains. And please pat us on the back for this because we're doing such a good job. And at the time there were Native Americans, at least within the United States that did like applaud and say, "Good job, Disney, at making a feature-length film about us where we're not the villain." But in retrospect, and as more time has gone on, looking back at it, it is more and more, oh, this is bad. This, yep, yep, not good.
Well, I think the most egregious reason why it's so gross is because in the movie Pocahontas, she's what, 16, 17 years old? That's not how old she was in the actual, like, historical event. She was, what, 9?
10, yeah, somewhere in that range.
Ugh. Gross.
13? You know what? That's one of those details that I maybe should have written down rather than just trying to think of it off the top of my head. Yeah, probably like 10. Yeah, probably like 10 when the English first showed up.
Yeah,
And I will say, side note, that Pocahontas, not the name that was given to her.
yeah, Pocahontas was born as Amonut, known as Matoka, circa 1596, and she was captured and held for ransom by the English colonists during the hostilities in 1613.
Yeah. But we'll continue to use the name Pocahontas because that's what all of history and all of us know her name as. In the same way that throughout this we'll be referring to her father as Powhatan or Powhatan, despite the fact that that wasn't his name. That was the name of the Confederacy of People that he led. His actual name was Wahuna Sinakau, or Wahuna Sinakok. Sources differ.
I'm sorry, I laughed because
I
I'm still have the...
probably not saying that quite correctly.
Yeah, you said cock, and the middle schooler in me was like, heh, laugh.
Yeah, and that is, with the cock at the end, that is definitely one of the ways of saying it. The middle schooler in me also looked at that and went, yep, I'm not gonna go with that version. That's not the version I'm gonna use.
I think the reason why I giggle is not because the name is funny, but it's because that's probably not at all how they say it. That is how we as Americans read it, which is like Bangkok.
Yeah.
That's not how it's said over there. That's how we saw it spelled out, and our brain was like, huh, badooch.
This is the word. This is how these letters sound.
Right. That's not at all how they say it. If you go over there, it's a completely different pronunciation, but also you do have to really, really be forgiving of yourself for you don't know this language and you don't know how to pronounce this stuff, so I'm sure that people of this tribe, if they see that you're really trying, they'll give you a condescending pat, but they know you can't say it.
It's like, we know you mean well. Get better.
Right.
But as for the film itself, or really I would like to tangent on historical films in general, because one of the ways that historical films in general often get criticized is their lack of accuracy. And I, as someone with a history degree, I don't need historical films to be perfectly accurate. Even like ones that are like nominally presenting things in a documentary type fashion.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, if uniforms are not perfectly correct, or if there's something that, they wouldn't have had pocket watches at this point during the Renaissance, or things of that nature, a lot of that I'm willing to let slide.
Yeah. I too like historical movies, and even if they are, like, no way accurate, sometimes you're not watching them for accuracy, you're watching them just to see, alright, how far did we deviate from this?
Yeah. And there's also an element of, like, in the order of events of history. I don't need those things to be completely historically accurate either when making a, like, based on true events kind of story. I think a really good example of that is Remember the Titans.
Ah.
A movie about a football team from a school where a all-white and all-black school merged together, and so the football team is now mixed white and black. And the movie is about that narrative and, you know, the overcoming adversity and triumphing in the end. You know, like feel-good movies usually do.
Right.
The reality of that story is that there wasn't as much drama about that merger as the film portrays. Like, there wasn't that much. The movie portrays a lot of hostility in the early going, and there wasn't that kind of hostility when it happened, like in reality, when it happened.
Right.
The movie also portrays their final game as being a close fought to the end of the line, barely achieving victory.
Mm-hmm.
That was also not the reality in history. The reality in history was that their most difficult game, like that most difficult game, took place like as game 4, and then they just were on easy street the rest of the season. I am perfectly fine with Remember the Titans dramatizing those events,
Right.
for the story that they were telling.
Yeah, like if I really want to watch like a World War II movie, I generally, right, I'll put on a World War II documentary. But if I want to just watch We're in the Business of Killing Nazis, I put on Inglourious Bastards because it is in no way, shape, or form historically accurate, but damn if it's not fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can have you can also have a pretty darn historically accurate, not intended as a documentary film. Like, that is a thing that can happen. The movie Tora Tora Tora,
Mm-hmm.
which was made in the early 1970s, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
It was done by a team of American and Japanese filmmakers and actors. So all of the Japanese scenes were done with Japanese actors and Japanese directors. All of the American scenes were done with American directors and American actors. And that collaboration in telling the story of Pearl Harbor, they tried to be as historically accurate as possible.
Right.
And I am, like, I would highly recommend that film for anyone that is interested in like seeing a movie that their intent was to make a movie while trying to be historically accurate rather than making a documentary. In contrast, we have the movie Pearl Harbor that came out in the late 90s that took a significant amount of liberty in terms of its historical retelling, that for the most part I'm okay with the liberties they took, but there are a couple things that I object to.
Right. Well, that's like me personally, because we've talked about this before. World War One is my absolute favorite war, and when 1970, the 2019 film came out, I was super ecstatic because this is actually World War One stuff, and we never really get to see it. And the reason why I like it is because it specifically talks about Germany's retreat to the Hindenburg Line during Operation Albrecht,
Hmm.
and it's specifically about these two kids on the British side trying to make a last ditch effort run through occupied enemy territory. Like, they're coming around all kinds of stuff, bloated bodies in the water, soldiers fighting in between the lines, all that other stuff. Well, they're trying to get to Benedict Cumberbatch. That's so weird. They're trying to get to Benedict Cumberbatch to warn him of a doomed offensive attack, which I was like,
Yeah.
all of this, right? Everything leading up to the actual don't do this is historical Hollywood shenaniganry. Did all of this maybe happen during the war? Absolutely. But
Hmm.
no, there was probably not a bunch of them just waiting to get the go ahead singing Poor Wayfaring Stranger, which is a song that came out in not 1917. It came out in
Yeah.
1944. So we are playing fast and loose with the timeline.
Yep.
But that wasn't the point of that movie. You are so engrossed in the war aspect of it, you kind of don't give a shit about, was this song actually happening? Was this a real thing that happened? It might have been a real thing that happened to a couple soldiers, but it's not like what was the main, thing in World War One.
Hmm. Yeah. And it ultimately comes down to, does do these liberties that are made detract from the actual historical events, or are they misinforming the audience in ways that are really detrimental to people's understanding of the historical event?
Inglorious
Um,
Bastards, yes, none of that happened.
yep.
But that's
But
not why you
Inglourious
watch it.
Bastards, but Inglorious Bastards is also not trying to like indicate, yep, we're telling a real, actual, based on true events story.
Right.
It's pretty upfront about what it's trying to be.
Also, it's a
Um,
Quentin Tarantino movie. Like, guys, come on. You know for
yeah,
a fact this is not historically accurate. I think the only thing he got right was we definitely went to Germany to film some scenes. Really.
yeah, and there are Nazis, and there were Nazis back then.
And that one guy who plays in American Horror Story, who's actually Jewish, gets to be the big scary Jewish man that they take with them who beats the shit out of Nazis with bats. There's so much to unpack in that one sentence. But that's not why you came here. You didn't come here for historical accuracy. You came here for Brad Pitt and killing Nazis.
Yep, yep. That's why. That is why we come to this film.
But specifically,
Um,
Pocahontas is one of those. Oh my god, I don't even know where to start on your tomfoolery.
yeah. So before we start on there, I'm gonna backtrack to Pearl Harbor first because I think that gives a good opening for us to dig into Pocahontas, which
Please
is
do.
specifically that with Pearl Harbor, it's you can watch the movie and see that the primary story that is actually being told in that movie is the love triangle. Like that is the narrative of this film, and the history of the lead up to World War II, Pearl Harbor, and then at the end the Doolittle attack. That is a backdrop to that story of those three individuals. And this is where I can have problems with how Pearl Harbor deals with history, is that the story is that romantic, like that love triangle, but it was often marketed and portrayed as we're trying to be historically accurate. And in doing so, because of some of the liberties they took, in terms of historical events, they actually end up misinforming the audience about key elements of the Pearl Harbor attack. The most prominent one on my mind is there are a lot of scenes where they show Japanese planes like gunning down civilians or bombing the hospital. This is a complete fabrication from history. The Japanese had legitimately strict instructions to not attack civilians and to not bomb civilian infrastructure. Now, obviously, some civilians died in the attack. There were some accidental, like bomb drops or plane crashes where they didn't intend to hit. But the movie Pearl Harbor portrays the Japanese as intentionally targeting civilians and intentionally targeting like the hospital for like dramatization purposes, which has the effect of misinforming the audience to the actual level of brutality that the Japanese were engaging in that specific conflict, which was they weren't doing that then.
Right.
The Japanese have plenty of war crimes under their belt, but at that point, that wasn't one of them.
Right. Also, it is well documented that prior to the attack on Pearl Harbor, because of everything else that had been going on, the Japanese military was actually in arguments with the Emperor of all the people to attack, maybe not them, because they've never been part of this war, so if we go to attack them, they're gonna wreck our shit real fast. And then mistakes were made.
Yeah. Yep. It was basically some people going, but we want the resources of the South Pacific, and other people going, but America is ouch.
Well, realistically, when people are like, oh, well, America came in and saved the day, and ha ha ha, it's like, yes. However, nobody likes to remember the fact that America was asked for aid when the war first began, and we strictly said, not our problem, not our war, have fun though, let me know who wins. It wasn't until the Pearl Harbor attack that we sat up in our gamer chair and went, now you have my fucking attention. Coming for your teeth.
Well, it's a little more nuanced than that. We were willing to provide, like, hey, if you give us cash, we will give you weapons. Germany, this doesn't apply to you. Just Great Britain. Definitely, like, so it was kind of we're definitely not picking sides, but we're totally picking sides.
War profiteering at its finest.
When Great Britain effectively ran out of cash, we did the United States and Great Britain did an exchange of basically Britain going, here are some military bases that you will have a lease on for 99 years, and we get these 50 destroyers. We get these boats.
Make it an even 100 and you got a deal.
Yeah. And part of the reason that these kinds of deals were able to be made is because, in effect, the U.S. Congress was not eager to join the war, but President Roosevelt had we should help. So Roosevelt was using what authority he had as the president to do what he could to help. So I would say that your general description, Hella, of like the American people had this isn't our fight, leave us out of this, is correct. But there were definitely people in American government that had we should do something. But polls say no.
Survey says no.
Survey says unpopular. And so to some extent the American government at the time did like what they could to help. But it would be interesting to rerun the history if there was no Pearl Harbor, when or if the United States would get more involved. Because I do think that is a interesting question to ask.
I mean, there have been plenty of TV shows and books describing how, well, what happens if Germany took over America? And all I could think of is, good luck getting through the South and the Appalachians. Those are crazy people.
Also, good luck getting across the Atlantic. Holy smokes.
Right, it's like, I understand we're trying to write a deep, dark, grim, evil story about the perils of war. However, have you been to the South? Everybody and their mother has a gun. Good
Yeah.
luck.
Yep. And as you say, good luck getting over the Appalachians. Like, I have been over the Appalachians. That is some crazy terrain to try to travel through.
Plus, there's apparently people that just live in the Appalachian Mountains themselves who just are so far off the grid that there's people that live out here? Indeed, there are. Where
Yeah,
are they?
like another historical side tangent. There is a reason that during the 1930s, one of the big New Deal projects was like electrification in the Appalachians. Like it was really, really hard to do stuff in that country, in that part of the country.
It's hard to do anything in the... Okay, tangent on this. For those of you who don't live near mountainous areas, mountains are basically the biggest middle finger nature will give you is because they're designed to be hard to go over, and they're a bitch to go around.
Yep. Frankly, the only feature that I can think of as being comparable in annoyance of traveling through are canyons.
Can you hear me now? Nope.
Just because it's basically your opposite problem of trying to go up things that are very long drops and trying to go down things that are very long drops.
You get to choose,
Neither
Mr. Bond.
are easy.
You get to choose, Mr. Bond. Die by canyon or die by mountain. Neither.
Yeah.
You only get the
I
two
would-
choices.
I would like neither of those, please. Nope, sorry, too bad.
Yeah.
So circling back to the movie Pocahontas. For me, Pocahontas is firmly in the Pearl Harbor type of historical movie where you have botched your history so badly that people come away from your film having a complete misunderstanding of history. Like it is a film where well done on having your historical figures, or at the very least names of historical figures. Like I actually didn't know this for sure. So in preparing for this tea time, I looked up Ratcliffe in was this a person that Disney made up, or did they actually exist? The answer being they did actually exist, although he is way dramatized in the film. Basically, I would say the only thing that he really carries over with that the Disney version carries over with his real life counterpart is some level of I am so great. As according to historical records, during his presidency, because that was the name of the office that he held while he was there. He wanted people to make him a governor, like a governor's mansion, at a point in time when they didn't have very much food.
Build you a house, eat. Build you a house, eat. Sorry, dude. Eat. I'll raise your house.
Yeah. It's like, why are we going to all this effort of building you a really fancy house when when all of us lack food? And the other interesting thing that I found in researching Ratcliffe's specifically was that he was the second leader of the colony. Like, he was not the person in charge when they first arrived. Though he was a captain of one of the 3 ships that came with. but he also was knocked out of his term in office for not doing a good job leading. So I guess the movie does a decent job of reflecting that as well.
Yeah. I think the reason why I personally never really vibed too hard with Pocahontas was because Disney has always shoved in musical ditties into their stuff. That's never been an issue, but it was the fact that this is based on historical accuracy and people are just busting out into song, and I'm like,
Mhm.
what? What are you doing? That was not the time to
Yeah.
be singing.
Some of those songs are bangers, though.
Oh yeah, Savages? Yes. Real good. Probably not what happened though.
Definitely not what happened. And that song is actually a really good example of the, oh man, this aged really badly. Not only in the name of the song, since that is a slur of a word, when used to reference Native Americans, but also the song equivocates the situation between the Powhatan Confederacy and the English settlers by like saying, oh yeah, this is a problem of both of them, when like the reality is that we have English colonists showing up in the Americas to explicitly take the stuff of the Native Americans. Like, that's what they're there for. The like in the actual history, the English settlers, they weren't coming to like set up a trading post and then have just trade relations between the Native Americans and England. They were coming there to gain land and to turn it into farms, to turn it into tobacco plantations, so that those products could then be brought to England. They did some trade with the native peoples, but that wasn't the goal. The goal was specifically to get more land to build an economic base on. So the Native Americans, like, frankly, they have a justifiable reason for being mad at the English.
Oh yeah, hardcore.
And that song, and so that song in particular equivocates the conflict between Native Americans and English by basically going, oh, they both were wrong. Like, both of them were bad in this situation.
I don't know, I feel like if I showed up to a gunfight with a pointy stick, I'd lose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just something in me tells me I'd lose that fight. I'm not entirely too sure what.
Yeah.
It would not have been a fair fight, and I think that's why when people sit there and try and tell me, but what do the Native Americans have to be mad about? Hey Barbara, when somebody comes into your house, says it's theirs, and then tries to kill you, and then fails at that and tells you, oh, that's okay, I'll just relegate you to the bathroom and that's where you get to live for forever, you can then come talk to me. Until then, shut up.
Yeah. And, and even the most optimistic appraisal of the situation that you could make is like, person shows up and basically has a, yeah, I'm gonna live in your living room now, and
Not pay
over
rent.
time, like, they start having more of their friends come live there. Like, you can, like, even at that early stage, you can understand why the Native Americans would be upset.
Yeah.
These English show up uninvited, set up their own living space, and then they keep inviting all of their friends over.
And to add super
Also, they keep starving. Also, they keep starving to death during the winter and ask you for food.
Right. Realistically, when anybody sits there and tries to tell me, oh, but the Native Americans don't have a real big reason to be mad, I'm like, uh, yes they do. I beg you to read your history. You learn so
Yep.
much when you do.
Yeah. So as for the Pocahontas movie itself, the way that it obfuscates that historical narrative is the biggest problem that I have with how the film is structured. I mean, we can dig into those other nitty-gritty details of like Pocahontas wasn't actually like 17, 18. She is not the implied age in the film of being like
Almost an adult.
almost or in adulthood.
Yeah, so I've
Um,
been looking it up and I found a couple different historical articles that say what exactly she was, and one person was like, at most she was maybe 11, and I'm like, okay, that doesn't make it sound better, that makes it sound worse considering what they did to her after they kidnapped her.
well, and that's and the yeah the so to dig into that historical context of Pocahontas being captured by the English. Um, the English first show up in England in 1606,
Mm-hmm.
7,
Mm-hmm.
thereabouts, and the initial interactions between the Native Americans, the Powhatan Confederacy, and the English were tense, but not really explicitly violent. Um, in the sense of like killing each other. This is 1607 is the supposed time when John Smith was saved by Pocahontas. It is worth noting that John Smith makes no mention of that in his 1608 or 1612 recountings of interacting with the chief of the Powhatan. Uh, he only first mentions it in 1614, after he has long returned to England. Now, the initial violence within the colonist, like actual war between the colonists and the Powhatan Confederacy, begins in 1609, after John Smith, who had been injured in a gunpowder accident, returned to England. Now, it is notable that this war started at that point in time, as it is the context for why Pocahontas was captured by the English in 1613. They were at war with Pocahontas's dad. So
Yeah.
when they had information that allowed them to capture her, it provided them a negotiation tool, we shall say, in basically preventing the Powhatan Confederacy from attacking / raiding English settlements. The date of her capture is March of 1613, and for the next year, there are differing accounts, though we have basically no knowledge of, like, we don't have any like clear knowledge of what
Stop
her
complaining. No more
captivity was
snacks.
like. Beyond, this is the time when she converted to Christianity, and she married the tobacco planter John Rolfe in April 1614. There are theories that while she was in captivity, she was, trigger warning, raped. Most historians broadly conclude that this was not the case, as it would have been really, really, really
let's go.
bad for the English colonists if they were doing that. In addition, it is known from the general historical record that Pocahontas, and this is something that the Pocahontas movies, both the first and the second one, allude to and kind of get right, that by all accounts she had friendly relations with the English colonists. Like, she was not hostile to them, and all indications that we have are that the English colonists were not hostile to her either. Which I do find I do find interesting from a historical standpoint.
Yeah.
But so that is all of the background context of why Pocahontas was captured. To provide an analogy that may have been a facsimile of given the time that we were in the 1600s, it would be similar in Europe, as if like one kingdom was at war with another kingdom, and Kingdom 1 managed to capture the daughter of the king of Kingdom 2. Like, that was a thing that if you could do it, you did it in those days. And you would do that by way of being able to go, we now have an important family member, let's negotiate. And when it comes to the marriage between John Rolfe and Pocahontas, based on the historical record, we have indications that this was not only mutual, but also accepted by the Powhatan Confederacy, as it was after this marriage that this first war stopped, and there was a time of genuine peace between the English and the Powhatan Confederacy. So to go back to my Kingdom 1, Kingdom 2 analogy, this could be analogized to, okay, our kingdoms have been at war, your daughter is marrying it's not technically my son, it would be like
my bakery chef.
my bakery chef. And this seals our peace treaty, and we're not going to be attacking each other anymore. So that is a broader historical context on Pocahontas being captured by the English. Like, not in any way trying to say that it was okay, or that because by all accounts the marriage between her and John Rolfe was mutual, that makes everything okay, but more about providing the surrounding historical context of why this event happened, and that it's not like some holy smokes, the English were such monsters. It's no, everyone was monsters. This was the norm. This would have been the norm at the time.
Yeah. There is a lot to deconstruct when people try and sit there and say, but the British Empire was really bad. I'm like, guys, This is like trying to explain that your shitty neighbor that never puts away their recycling is not putting away their recycling. It's not the big oh gotcha you think it is. Everybody knows this. I promise.
Yeah.
Everybody knows this.
Well, and it's also the English were really terrible, but like their terribleness gets so much worse past this point.
Right. So 1600s, I'm trying to think of anybody else that they are actively in the middle of conquering or setting up colonies at, and I'm just like, there's too many to count. We'll be here all night.
Well, it's at this point in history, this is England really getting their footing, in terms of like outside of Europe. But if you want to talk about where England had like already was showing their hand of their awfulness, we can just look at Ireland. Like the things that
Ireland.
The things that the English did in terms of holy cats you are bad, they had already been doing in Ireland.
Right, I think that's why when people sit there and try and tell me it's like, they didn't do this to anybody else. Hey guys, they literally subjugated a whole fucking part of their own continent before they got to anybody else.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why it's not a great idea to like tell Irish people that they're colonizers.
They'll fight you.
Did Irish people end up overseas? Yes. So by like the very, very narrow, strict definition, sure, maybe. However, Ireland itself was colonized by the English.
And before that,
Scots.
right, and I would like
the Scots alongside the English. That is part of where my ancestry is.
Right, I think this is. Go ahead.
Sorry, part of my ancestry is Scot-Irish, which means that I have ancestors who were Scots who settled in Ireland. It's not that I have ancestors who were like intermarried Scottish and Irish, although that plausibly could be the case. But the Scotch-Irish is specifically a reference to Scottish who colonized Ireland and then came to the Americas. So like in my background, I have like double colonizer on my side.
And Paco was here for this. I did a 23andMe, and when I did the 23andMe, because my mother is Hispanic and my father was white, I was under the assumption, okay, it's just gonna pop me up like a 50-50 sprinkled with some other stuff. I got my DNA test back. I had to do an entirely separate test because I think I thought it was wrong before. It popped me up at like 22 point something, almost 23% Native American, and I was like, where the hell did this come from? Who slept with somebody of the native people? Raise your hand. This doesn't make sense. But Paco brought up a good point of so many Native American people were displaced due to all the horribleness that happened because of colonization. They might not have even known that they were Native American themselves, which I was like, that's true.
Yep, and this is especially the case for peoples that live within Central America and to a lesser degree South America, because the Spanish that came to those regions, especially in Mexico and the coast of what was formerly the Inca Empire, there was a lot of intermarriage between Spanish settlers and Native Americans. It is one of the reasons why so many people from those regions look the way they do, even though they have a lot of Spanish blood, a lot of Spanish ancestry. Like, Hispanic people Hispanic isn't so much a race as a classification of people from south of Texas. But it is but it is why so many Hispanic people have a lot of Native American DNA, and in some cases, predominantly Native American DNA. Like in parts of Bolivia, parts of Peru, parts of Guatemala, there are still a lot of people in those areas that are predominantly Quechua or Mayan, or even in parts of Mexico, like if not the Aztecs themselves, at least some of the peoples that were part of the Aztec Empire.
Yeah. It's one of those fun little ditties of all the conquerors from long ago did the same one cardinal sin that's been screwing people over forever. You've lost a lot of your history because they've erased so much of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that, I actually think, provides us a nice tangent to get back onto Pocahontas, in that the film of 1995 is effectively a major motion picture that does a lot to erase the real actual history of Pocahontas, John Smith, and the early contact between Native Americans and the English. The movie tries to put a spin on, can't we all just get along, and both sides did some bad things. That really covers up the reality of what was going on and sugarcoats the history, sugarcoats the reality of the history that would follow.
Yeah. All I can think of is draw back to the last time we did, the movie Black Panther, when Killmonger is in the museum, like, talking to the curator lady and then tells her point blank, this isn't yours. It's like, yes, actually, all the things you see in museums are technically stolen artifacts from other countries, and the only reason the Pyramid of Giza are not on display is because they literally couldn't uproot them from Egypt.
They couldn't fit it in their pockets, so they left it there. This is very much significantly true. I will say that fortunately in the last few decades, at least with some museums, things are getting better in that regards. Not the British Museum, mind you, but at least with some other ones, they're doing a better job of repatriating artifacts to their original locations. As it would be now, they're like modern country iterations, not the people that they actually took it from. And there are better... we are moving in some places towards better arrangements of having objects from other places that your museum is not based in, having those moving around so that people from around the world can see them, with their home base, so to speak, ultimately being the lands from where they came. But yeah, the British Museum, oh dang, like they are really bad about that, and that is, I'm almost 100% certain that was the intended presentation in the Black Panther film. That the museum that is on screen, I feel reasonably confident if it wasn't the British Museum, its intent was to signal it as being the British Museum.
Right.
Because the British in particular, were notorious for just taking stuff to bring back home. and showing it off. And often doing so under the auspices of, like, oh, we asked the authorities, us, the British, and we said it was okay.
Right. I think that's why in the Pocahontas, right, we're gonna get back to Pocahontas, when Ratcliffe in the movie is singing his song of, like, the gold of Cortez and the jewels of Pizarro will look like a miller trinkets, and it's like, hold up, wait a minute, everything you just listed was stolen before it got taken back. So it's like, they weren't trying to be subtle in this movie.
Yeah. That song does a really good job of illustrating why the English were there. They were there to make money. That was the goal.
There's gold.
Ideally through gold, but it turns out that there wasn't gold in Virginia.
There's gold in them there hills. Do you mean like nacho sauce? No. That doesn't come around to like the 40s, man. Like, you are way off.
And it's also there in fact was gold in them there hills, but it was the hills of North Carolina. You missed.
Like, you're in the right, like, time zone, but you were in the wrong state.
Wrong state. You also did not dig far enough inland. You also wouldn't find it for a while. I would need to double check my history on that when gold was actually struck there. But
right.
The broader point stands that the English were there for money. That was what they were there for.
Yeah, I think this is the reason why when we're talking about the movie Pocahontas, the reason why it rubbed a lot of Native Americans the wrong way is because this isn't at all what happened. You basically pulled a Twilight by Stephenie Meyer. You could have picked any other race. You could have made up a Native American race, or you could have just not put them in your damn book, Stephenie Meyer, and moved on. But you did, and now the actual people that are really real now have to deal with a bunch of stupid people asking them stupid questions. No, we don't jump off of waterfalls. No, we don't go singing around river bends. No, we don't talk to raccoons and talk to trees. No, we don't turn into werewolves. I don't know why people keep asking this stupid question.
Why do people keep asking us this?
And then they find out and you're like,
Yeah, like, realistically, the sliver of silver lining that I can find with the Stephenie Meyer thing was that it did manage to, for a time, pump additional money into that community. So it's they got some amount of money out of this that allowed. I think they were able to rebuild their school.
well, that's good.
And I think there were a couple other things that they got. I think some land was given to them from the state, like that Washington State transferred to their authority additional land so that their reservation is a larger chunk of land. So it's some silver linings, but people still think that they're werewolves.
Right. Unintended positive consequences. That's good. Unintended negative consequences. We'll be here all day.
Yeah. And frankly, there is when using, like, real life people in your fantasy novel, it might be a good idea to check in with those real life people.
Right? Like, did I go for my vampire book? Did I go to France, Italy, and, like, New York City? Fuck no. But thankfully for me, everybody and their mother talks about this. So I was like, I'm pretty confident that I can go here and I'm not gonna step on anybody's toes. Pretty sure.
And there's also a broad general difference when it comes to, like, having people groups that number in the tens of millions and are at the top of their respective food chains versus people groups that are numbered in, like, the dozens or hundreds that are at the very bottom.
Yeah. Like, if I decided... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Or for people groups that are numbered in the millions, but are still at the bottom of their respective...
like Jewish people.
Their respective food trees. Yeah, like Jewish people in society broadly, or black people in society broadly,
I
or trans people in society broadly. Like, these
or
are groups of people that number in significant numbers, but they don't have any social power, or at least they have very little social power.
See, I think this is the reason why if I ever decided I want to write a book where it's like voodooism, right? Like actual voodooism, number one, I'd have to go down to Louisiana and talk to people. And even then, I might
Yeah.
get told straight up, no, because voodooism is technically a closed religion. If you're not born into it, they're not just going to offer up info to you.
hmm Well, and this also goes to, for the story that I'm writing, with my wife. It's one of the reasons why we, very, very early in the process, chose to not make a fantasy world using real world stuff to a lot, like um, it like we are using some like names. We are using we might be using like some languages because like we don't really have the time or skill set to make that stuff up on our own. But when it comes to broader cultural signifiers, we are intentionally avoiding using those things. Cultural signifiers, religions, because we don't want to risk
Ruffling feathers.
ruffling feathers, and we don't have the time or resources to be able to go out to those individual places and or find those individual people to cross-check everything.
Right.
Now, because we are using certain names, there will likely end up being inevitably there will be some cultural things that we're borrowing, like architecture, things of that nature that we would be borrowing from. And so hopefully down the line we might have the ability to have contacts that we can check on things to make sure that we're like representing things okay. But we're avoiding as much as we can like religious signifiers or cultural interaction signifiers that could be construed as being of a specific real world culture. Instead, we are aiming to create our own as much as possible within some potential guiding frameworks on how, like, basically knowing how history and how geography and how people can function and influence each other and the cultures and religions and societies that they live in.
Right. I'm actually thinking of. So, I heard this on one of the people I watch on YouTube that does book reviews and everything. There was a
Yeah.
not a Native American, a African American girl who looked into her history and found out that she came from a tribe of people with very little history. So much so that she wrote a book, fantasy book, specifically with African American players as the main characters, and because so much of her history had been lost, she just made up all of her own stuff, and her people in Africa, when they heard about this and read it, were super excited because they were like, we know it's not the true history, but it's something that's
Yep.
ours. And I was like, right there. So much of their own history was lost that the fantasy that one girl wrote in America has now become almost gospel because they don't have any other backdrop. So it doesn't matter that her stuff is super fantasy, it's theirs.
Yeah. And that is something that really to me illustrates the importance of being able to keep your own history alive. Because it is really sad to not have that history anymore. Like, lose that connection to your past.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that is very it can actually be something very difficult to deal with. There is also something about even having a story written about your people where you don't have the real historical details, but having that exist as a thing, that people are interested in where you came from, people are interested in who you are, that is exciting and that is good. And it's something that I hope in the world that we live in right now, where there are so many different people groups around the world, where languages are in decline or histories are not getting written down, that we take seriously recording and preserving that stuff, not just like in paper, but in new generations of people.
Right.
That we're able to do that now, while we still have the opportunity to do so for many of these people, languages,
Can you get away from my door
and
when you
cultures
talk?
and histories. To provide a very interesting example, I think of the oh shoot, what's the name of the country? I guess it's not a country anymore because there are hardly any people left. Livonia. Livonians were a people group. Well, I guess they technically still are a people group in what is now the modern Baltics. But their numbers have been reduced down to literally like a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand people in total. So this is a people group that exists in Europe that in the modern day still exists, but whose language and culture is almost gone. And so we in the modern day have the instance of what could be characterized as a European minority whose culture and language are almost gone. And so it's not just a Native American problem or an African problem or an Indian problem or a South American problem. Like, there are languages and peoples, even within areas that we envision as being on top of the pyramid, that they have their own local, regional, they've always lived there minority groups that are almost gone.
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of people, when they think of European anything, they assume that it is, do you know what I mean? They assume, oh no, that's okay. It's they're prosperous. They haven't lost anything. Incorrect.
Yeah.
There's plenty of places that are rapidly losing their own history because the people there keep moving out to get away and they're not coming back.
Yep. And these places also, and of course the United States is guilty of it as well, in creating dominant narratives, in creating dominant views of history, you end up losing a lot of stuff in the process.
Sorry,
probably,
my roommates.
Oh, no worries. Probably one of the good examples that I'm aware of from history is what you could say is the consolidation of France being France, which took place during the French Revolution. Because while in retelling history, we have this big France on the map for a very long time, even up into the late 17 and early 1800s, France was very regionalized. There were Aquitanians, there were Britannians, there were
Goths, there were more Goths.
Seleucians. There were dozens of different regions of France that each spoke their own version of French. Like, they weren't even unified by a language well into the 1800s. And those regional French languages, those not really dialects because they were their own unique languages, they basically don't exist anymore. And that process was an intentional and deliberate one by the French state to make everyone more the same. But in doing so, and in doing that process, you lose stuff. And so it isn't just a situation where a colonial power comes into a new place and then either kills or tries to make everybody into that colonial power. It can happen internally within the homeland of that colonial power as well. And I think that when we remember history in that way, or rather that when we are recollecting that history, we tend not to think about how, like, France and England and Spain and Germany and Sweden, Norway, Denmark, these are fairly homogenous countries now. Or I guess before the EU allowed a lot of intermigration. Like, those countries we envision as being in the 20th century as being fairly homogenous. That is exceptionally new historically. Even like looking at the maps of these countries, of Spain, of France, England, Norway, Sweden, even looking at their maps as being, yeah, these have not changed for a very long time, but the people within them have.
Indeed.
And to pull us all the way back to the movie Pocahontas, I don't have a good tangent to get out of that back to the movie Pocahontas, but I want to pull us all the way back to the movie Pocahontas.
Well, I can. Like, even though all of these countries on maps have never changed, America itself has changed significantly if you were looking at maps, because first it started with whatever the 13 colonies were and, like, the Virginia Company and all that. Then the French trade happened to get all of the kind of middle part, and then the way out west happened to get all the way to the other coast, to California, with all the gold and stuff. Fuck.
Yep.
Expansion, that happened. According to a map, if you look at it bit by bit, it was just very slowly adding stuff, but America never really changed shape during all of that. It was just who was making the map changed.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to Pocahontas.
Yeah, bringing us back to Pocahontas. And, oh, here we go. I got your segue. So, bringing us back to Pocahontas, what we're seeing, what we should be seeing in that film, if we're being really honest about the history, is the beginning of that process of where the English are coming in and slowly taking and taking and taking. Because that was the reality of colonial history, wherever it happens in the world. Now, we predominantly think of European colonialism. Europeans were not the only peoples to engage in colonialism. I will be on my YouTube channel. I will be bringing up over the coming months examples of colonialism throughout world history, and it won't just be European countries. Spoiler alert.
Right.
But that is because that is fundamentally a thing. The idea of I want what this other group has. That isn't a European thing. That is a human thing. And
Envy is such an ugly sin.
it is such an ugly sin. And in the Pocahontas film, it sugarcoats that reality of history. That the English didn't come here to make friends. They did not come to North America to make friends. They came here to make money. And the Native Americans choosing to fight back against that is not the same thing as the English fighting to take. And this particular film, in equivocating those two positions, does a real disservice to the understanding of that history, as well as portraying Pocahontas and John Smith as being, well, they're the good ones that managed to save everybody, is also a that's not how this works.
Incorrect. None of this is right. They got everything name-wise correct, but everything they portrayed. What acid trip were you on?
and portraying events in the order that they do to tell the story that they want, it ends up getting you a narrative that is bad.
So bad.
And unhelpful. In contrast to Remember the Titans, where we have events that are out of order, and we have stakes that were made much higher than the reality, but the story is fine and still works that way.
Right. I think what it all boils down to is, if you're gonna watch any movie at all, even if it says based on historical true events, or just true events, Hollywood can't give you the story A, B, C, and D as it was told to them, because it's boring. They have to make it so that way you, paying the $19 to get into the movie theater to sit your butt down with your overpriced popcorn, will sit there and watch it and give it a good review. That's what they're hoping on. So they have to make it entertaining.
Very rarely in history do events actually transpire in a nice narrative fashion. As one of the saying goes, it's the job of historians to fix that.
Right. Like we said in another tea time, again, Hitler didn't roll out of bed one day and decide, while he's eating his Cheerios, yes, let's go invade Poland and be a dick for the next 5 to 6 years. There was other stuff that happened before that, I promise you.
He was already a dick, and he didn't eat Cheerios.
This reads like a Reddit post. Am I the asshole if I invade Poland? Yes!
When I create a false flag operation to justify invading my neighbor, am I the asshole?
Resounding yes. Fine, guys, I get it. I got the message. I'm an asshole. I'm gonna do it anyway. Hitler, please.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it anyway. Exactly.
What? Hell, for World War II being something you dislike talking about, you know a lot about it. I was born in this war. I went to fight in this war. I got a Purple Heart in this war, and then I graduated high school, and then I got to be part of the support group for this war. You never get away from World War II.
I blame the History Channel.
Same, dude.
But fortunately, the History Channel no longer talks about history. It talks about pawn shops and
I'm not saying it's aliens. but it's aliens. You want to know what? As for all the ancient alien shit, which just it low-key bothers me, that guy specifically does it because I'm like, he honest to God believes in aliens. He's hoping that Mass Effect becomes a thing, like unironically, and I can't blame him because so many people want that. I can't be mad at a man who hopes and prays all the time that aliens are real. I can't be mad at you for your ideal. I'm part of that ideal too. I hope aliens one day come down and we could be like, yes, it's over.
And the end is here. Okay.
How does it happen? Well, we're gonna get a notification above our head, world saves in 30 seconds, and then a bunch of notifications are gonna pop up because the game was patched, and then we finally get to the, it's time to go to war in space. What?
Hopefully it also notifies us of all the achievements that we've been getting.
And achievement unlocked. Intense mental trauma. That was an achievement? Oh my god, no.
That was an achievement I could get. I'm not sure that I like this one.
But this also means, right, if that happens, we can finally get into the customization screen for our character.
Ooh, man, that would be great. I would like to fix my receding hairline.
I would like to fix all of it. I'd like to restart my game, please.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But
Well,
no.
I think that we've pretty well exhausted the Pocahontas movie for now.
Yeah, well, we got everything we needed to, and we brought up good things to do. Oh, also one more thing about Pocahontas.
Yes.
It's the only thing. Most Native American women, even if they were children, don't tend to wear their hair loose. They tend to wear their hair tied back or like out of their face because they were working women. It was a lot of work to be Native American, so Pocahontas would not have had long, free-flowing hair all the time, forever and ever, amen.
Yeah, and that is a generalization that can also be applied in most parts of the world at the same time, because contrary to like popular belief, most women worked, and so they needed their hair out of their face.
The only women I think, and correct me if I'm wrong because you are the historian in this, most women that had their hair down usually were not women that worked, and I mean like blue-collar jobs, like actual had to get their hands dirty jobs. And even then, their hair wasn't all the way down and free-flowing, it was still up out of their face.
I could not say whether, like, in terms of the percentage of women that had long hair or not, but I can speak in the generality that any women that had long hair would have had it arranged in such a way so that it was not hanging down. Whether they were working on a farm, whether they were working in weaving or making food, like basically any kind of work that a woman would have been doing during anything pre-20th century, you needed to keep your hair out of your face.
Right. And I think that's the reason why when people try and pull that, well, why didn't they cut it? Most women with short hair really wasn't a thing. Like, unless your hair just grew exceptionally slow, long hair was the MO of most everybody, because cutting hair was a bitch.
Yeah. I mean, there's also something to be said for a very long time, men wore their hair long.
Yeah, like, I think that's the last thing I could think of.
To this day wear my hair long.
I am growing my hair out. Right, and again, right, that's less about the movie and that's more just about, that is also historically inaccurate because most women didn't have free-flowing hair for lots of different reasons, including but not limited to they were workers, and your hair being long, it's gonna get caught on something, and two, lice was rampant in ancient man and also pre-colonialism man, because, no offense, soap was a very new idea for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's actually an arena that I haven't looked much into, like in a how common was lice, but yeah, it probably was a significant issue, considering how much of an issue it is in the modern day, even
Right?
when we have ways of fighting it.
Right? One kid in a kindergarten class will send the entire class home for the rest of the day with a notification to the parents of, there might be lice on your child. Please check them before returning them tomorrow.
Yeah.
I can feel all the people that wear hats. It's not my problem. Lice can still get through your hat, friend.
Yep. Even worse, they can live in your hat.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I will say that I apologize that with my history degree I don't know literally everything in history. I guess I can keep working on that.
Oh, that's the fun part about learning. You learn stuff all the time that you didn't know before.
Yep. Even when I have areas of higher degrees of specialization, in which mine was Native American history, Islam and the West, and ancient Rome. Three subjects that completely overlap.
We don't talk about Rome because Rome isn't real, said somebody on TikTok who is just, what?
That, yeah. The things that people on TikTok say that, this historical thing isn't really real because TikTok dance.
It makes no sense. But yeah, I think that's all I have other than, like, that was my just 2 cents. It's like, long free flowing hair was a thing when the day was done, but it was not something you just did. That's a very modern aesthetic.
Yep. And that for me is the kind of historical inaccuracy that, like, that wouldn't bother me very much, because it's not super important in terms of understanding the narrative of history. But I'm perfectly fine with folks out there that where they'll look at those kinds of details and just be like, that is historically inaccurate, and I am bothered by it.
Oh, well, if we're gonna go on that little tangent, then also Pocahontas's dress thing. Also, no, pants. Pants were a very big staple in American culture. It's cold.
Yeah, it cold. It cold in North America.
Especially in Virginia, like 95% of the year, it's cold.
Well, Virginia 95% of the year, not so much. They got a lovely exchange of, it is exceptionally hot, and boy is it freezing.
But still, pants are necessary for all times of year. Why? Snakes. Very true.
Yeah, there were very good reasons to wear pants even in the summertime. Snacks is certainly a very good one.
Danger noodles are very important to look out for. I know you don't see them too often in modern cities, but still.
And also, boy, were they an important thing to be looking out for in early American history.
See, now all I can think of is, do you hear that noise? Do I hear when I say ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch? I think you're hearing things. No, look, that shit right there is making that noise and it looks mean. You think
And then, of course, you have copperheads that don't even have the decency of having a rattle to notify you that they're mad.
Right? It's like, the Wild West must have been super fun for a lot of people to realize everything out here can kill me.
Yeah. It's like Australia, but not quite as deadly.
Right? It's all fun and games until, why is that big bird following us? I don't know, man, but Larry's really lagging behind. Larry, are you good? I'm dying of thirst. You don't think that bird's gonna eat him, do you? Now that you've said it.
That's why the bird is following us.
Well, now that you've said it, now I am worried about it.
Yeah. I wasn't worried about it until now.
Like, it's like, Larry, come catch up to us so you don't get eaten by a bird. So I don't get eaten by what? Bird. This is a big bird. Yes.
I thought I was hallucinating.
Again, that is a very, like, tongue-in-cheek way of saying it, but also, somebody had to have realized vultures followed things that they knew were gonna die real soon.
Yeah. Although I think that their following tended to be from up in the sky.
Well, when there's nothing around you and you just see the shadow in the sky following you, your first thought is gonna be, why is it following me? Because you're out here all alone and you are not looking good.
You're alone and you ain't looking great.
Literally, vultures. Are you gonna eat me? I mean, not right now. But later, yes.
Soon. Sign. Holding sign. Soon.
Right? Soon. Do they eat everything? Oh yeah, if they know they can get away with it, they'll take anything to dinner. But yeah, I think we're done. I think we've covered everything historically accurate and inaccurate wise for Pocahontas.
And hopefully, I have expressed my views in a understandable fashion of what kind of historical inaccuracies in a movie I generally consider to be like okay, things that you don't need to worry about too much, versus the types of things when it comes to historical inaccuracies that I take issue with. Because I do think that I'm not black and white in that view. I see shades of gray.
Yeah.
But also, thank you for letting me ramble on about some of the actual history of early Americas and colonialism in general. As I had mentioned earlier, I will be putting out a series of videos on colonialism and imperialism over the coming months, both that will be going over what these two concepts are, how they interrelate, and then various examples throughout history of different kinds of colonizing and imperial powers.
Yeah. It's just, those are gonna be fun videos, because it's like, oh man, there's so much to go through.
Yep, and there has been a lot of research that I've had to go through to be able to get this project put together.
Yeah, it's... Paco literally this entire time. I've got to write it, then I've got to cry, then I've got to go do more research about it, and then write, and then do a little bit more crying. It's a lot of crying and researching.
Yeah, it's more researching, crying, then writing down, then crying.
Remember, kids, it's
Although
okay to cry.
I will say that most of my crying happens internally. I think that my tear ducts don't work.
Yeah, so that's it. Thank you so much, Paco, for coming back in for another tea time, and thank you, lovely viewers, for showing up. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.
Bye!
Later, folks.
Oh.